You will not do better than your parents. Here's why. Hey channel, welcome back to the guys. Today I wanted to talk about something that a lot of us are probably hearing about. I mean, if you read anything finance related, you're interested in finance whatsoever, economics, politics. Actually, politics is probably a better reference for what we're talking about here, which is this whole idea of upward mobility. You might have heard all these statistics that, millennials, they're kind of lazy, they're stuck in their house, they aren't really making any money. They graduated out of university with all these degrees and they were very entitled, and they came into one of the worst recessions in the last 100 years. And that's obviously pretty difficult. It's like you don't have any job experience and now you're entering a labor market where just no one is getting anything. No one's getting a job. All the people who were supposed to be retiring because they had all these pensions and investment assets end up not being able to retire because the market just crashed by 50% and their advisors sucked. So one of the stats that we're all hearing is kind of this pessimistic take against capitalism or against the way our economy's set up. And it's all talking about how, hey, we live in an era where and one statistic says that in 1940, 91% of people made more money than their parents. They did better than their parents. Every generation, things got better and better. But over time, we've slowly seen this decline and decline and decline to the point where now less than 50% of people do better than their parents. And that's tough, right? Because that means half of the population, half of people don't feel like they're making upward progress. Now, I take issue with a few things here. First of all, I'm not a pessimist. I think the cliche that I say all the time is, pessimists sound really smart because it sounds like they have something, there's some insight about how the world works and how negative everything is. But it's the optimists that get paid. It's the optimists that do well, because in order to have success, you kind of need this weird form of, Tom, what was it? Was it irrational irrational optimism?
Irrational optimism.
Right, irrational optimism. You need some form of irrational optimism. It's not as if you want to be irrational, but you kind of want to be optimistic and maybe overly so. So this whole idea that, we'll never be as good as our parents, it just hits me the wrong way. And one of the easiest ways to really pick a hole in this whole thing is that, the stat says in 1940, 91% of people made more than their parents. What were their parents doing? What were their parents doing in 1905? They were like building factories and like laying rail lines down and like digging ditches and stuff. It's not much harder to do better than your parents when they just immigrated from some other country and don't have any education, might not even speak the language. Our parents became middle managers. They became executives. They became, leaders of corporations, and they became contractors and lawyers and accountants and doctors. It's going to be harder to outperform a generation of doctors and lawyers than it would be to outperform a generation of ditch diggers, right? And now you're trying to freelance on Etsy, expecting to do better than your doctor parents. There's some things that go into this. Now, one of the things that has always bothered me a little bit is that people expect to do better than their parents. It's like it's some natural feature of society that as time goes on, everybody is going to do better than their parents without trying, because the world should just get naturally better and better over time. The reason the world has gotten better and the reason your parents did so well relative to their parents is because of the whole responsibility argument. They went into university knowing, university is a bonus and it's gonna help me get a job, but it's not the ticket. I'm gonna still need to go out there and make decisions. I'm gonna need to go and try to land a job. I'm gonna have to go sell myself, right? Our generation, it's kind of almost been sold to us because our parents had so much success with the university system and coming up through the ranks and working for one company for 40 years. They kind of passed down this tradition to us that, hey, if you do what we did, this is all gonna work out. But we live in a very different world. And that is exactly where I got completely hit over the head by this fantastic idea I came across called the Algebra of Wealth. And really, this is something by a famous entrepreneur and professor named Scott Galloway. And it's super simple, right? Because I love to just have things in a formula. Everything makes so much sense if we can just break every complex problem of life and down into a little equation. Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way, but I think we can glean a lot of insight from Scott Galloway's Algebra of Wealth, which I highly recommend you heed some of the advice here because it's really interesting. The equation isn't even algebra. It's not complex at all. It's just multiplying a few things together. And the way that this is broken down is that wealth is equal to four things times each other, okay? Wealth is equal to focus, times Stoicism times time times diversification, okay? Now, that's a very simple equation, but I want to break down what we mean by each of those four things and how pursuing those four things and maximizing them is the way that you're going to outperform your parents. The way that you're going to earn more than your parents and to feel that upward mobility in society and to have that feeling that your career is meaningful and you're making progress, you have to take action towards that. That doesn't happen. It's not like you're some magnet that's going to attract opportunities. It doesn't matter how smart you are. It doesn't matter how well educated you are. You have to go out and do some things yourself to take the responsibility to make all of those things happen. So let's talk about the first one, which is focus. Now, this is super fascinating because a lot of people are always thinking about where has the world gone? Where is the successful places to go? I have a video talking about how I thought about going into investment banking. And the whole idea there was like, I searched up, okay, what are the highest earning careers? What can I do in finance that makes a lot of money? And the first thing that comes up in investment banking. But what you're getting there is you're getting a picture of what has happened in the past, right? If I had gone into investment banking, I would have very quickly realized, well, now all the talent's going to tech in Silicon Valley and all the big technology companies. You have to focus. You have to put your mind solely on one thing that isn't about where the world has come from, but is more about where the world is going. And this is why it's difficult. This is why it's difficult to outperform your parents, because to some degree, you have to predict what are the next big trends. And I don't want to say trends in some superficial way, like you have to pick the next big thing, but you have to be a little more thoughtful. You have to find, okay, one of the interesting things is that a lot of very successful people say, go find your passion. But the funny thing is they're already successful. You know, what you should be doing, the focus argues, what you should be doing is finding something that you can be resilient about. And people talk about passion. Oh, do something you're really passionate about. But in reality, the reason we talk about passion is because passion is something that you'll stick to even when it sucks, right? Passion is like, you're horrible at a sport like golf and you stick to it because it's enjoyable, or you're horrible at YouTube like I am and you stick to it because it's a passion. It's something you're excited about. So the reason for passion is that it creates focus. The number one predictor of success is grit or resilience. Are you willing to do something over and over and over again, even if it's not working, and try to get those results, right? That's what focus is. Forget passion. Focus on where is the world going and what problem am I resilient enough about to continue to try to solve. So that's the first part, focus, getting your focus right. Another little bonus was, one thing you need to focus on too is your relationships. Because first of all, it's much easier to be successful in life if other people around you want you to be successful. If everybody around you kind of hates you and they're resentful and they don't really like you and you've, maybe screwed a few people over, it's hard to be successful because the people around you don't want that to happen. But the more important factor here is focusing on your relationships with a significant other. This is very fascinating. Married couples accumulate 77% more net worth than singles. That's kind of fascinating. I mean, there's dual incomes and there's more ways to accumulate. There's tax benefits and all that sort of thing. But you are wagering 50% of your future wealth on showing up to your marriage, right? If you don't show up in your marriage, 50% of your money, 50% of your assets, it goes away. And this is one of the things that Scott Galloway talks about. He went through a divorce. And what that happens is it takes all that wealth you've accrued over time and it splits it in half. So you cannot ignore that. Next part of the equation, we had focus and times Stoicism. Now, what does Stoicism mean? Well, it comes from like these Stoic philosophers, people like Marcus Aurelius and Epictetus. You may have heard of all this stuff. Stoicism is essentially a philosophy that says, hey, you can't control anything. So just cool it, like just chill, man. Because everything that goes on out there, that person that gave you the finger, the road rage, something doesn't go your way in business, like don't let that affect you. You want to control the things you can control. And what we mean in this sense, in Stoicism with your money, is that we live in an age of superabundance, right? You can have anything you want whenever you want for an affordable price. You can get fast food at any point. You can go and just jump in on all your vices. You can gamble and drink and do all the things in the same night. And your brain loves that stuff and it's cheap. But what we need is a little more stoicism, a little more control over our emotions. One of the biggest factors in your success financially is, can you control your emotions? Firstly, on what you're spending on and all the things that billions of dollars of marketing, advertising dollars goes into making you feel insufficient so that you buy more stuff, okay? You have to counteract that, but also more importantly, in the seat that I sit in, is FOMO. You know when you have that feeling, and I'm not sure how long you've been into entrepreneurship or to investing, but if you've been involved in these things, you've experienced FOMO because you might have been watching as this whole GameStop thing happened this past year, or as AMC happened, or as Bitcoin soared to the moon, right? you are not involved in those things, you feel FOMO. It's like everybody else is getting rich except for me. Everybody else is having financial success except for me. Look at the storylines, look at the headlines. All these stupid people are making a lot of money. And when you feel that emotion, I want you to just even meditate on it right now and feel that emotion of FOMO. What that means when you're investing or you're an entrepreneur, it means you're about to lose a shit ton of money. That is what FOMO does. It means that you are the last person in on a trend and you can't help but try to just squeeze out a little profit. And what's gonna end up happening is you're gonna be left holding the bag on whether it's some trade or whether it's some sort of entrepreneurial venture you're taking part in. That feeling of FOMO is something that is the antichrist of wealth. You need to eliminate that FOMO, and I think this is one of the hardest things. Focus, sure, I can really focus in on something I'm passionate and resilient about. FOMO, the emotions and the behavioral things going on in your mind that convince you to spend more or try to get involved in trends, trying to pick tops and bottom with your investments, or trying to, start a Bitcoin startup and then a cannabis startup and being a money rabbit, as we call it, jumping from hot thing to hot thing. You're not playing long-term games. You're trying to get rich in a year. And what that's going to do is it's going to continue to, you're scratching lottery tickets. And we all know what happens to people who scratch lottery tickets. The human mind is very poor at understanding exponential growth. We think in linearities, like things grow incrementally. But it's hard for us to understand the fact that things can compound. Something can have more of an exponential growth. And even like, for instance, I'm doing YouTube and I'm really enjoying it. I find it quite fun. But the initial growth is so slow and it's like, oh, we grew by 10 subscribers in a month. That's what I was thinking when I first started. And now it's hard for me to understand that maybe in the future we'll grow at 1,000 subscribers a month or 10,000 subscribers a month. But apparently that happens. But it's hard for my brain to get wrapped around the fact that things could go exponential. So this is the whole thing about time. You have to be willing to play games in decades and not single years. If you're trying to make gains or start some business or invest to get rich in a single year, you're thinking linearly. You're thinking, how do I maximize my position in a short period of time? When really what wealth is it's the process of things compounding over multiple decades. So instead of thinking in days or years or in linear growth, we need to transform our mind to think more about compounding growth and how can we guarantee success for ourselves over multiple decades rather than in the next 2 or 3 years and sacrificing the distant future to have a better present. That's the opposite of what we want to do. So that is time. And the last element of the equation is diversification, right? If you're going to focus on something, like the first part, we're going to think about where is the world going? What am I passionate about? What can I really invest myself into? Some kind of project that gets me a stake. We need to hedge against our obsolescence. And what you want to do over time, what wealth really is, we know what wealth is. It's really well documented. It's earning income from capital versus labor. And what diversifying allows you to do is instead of going all in on your career, think about, okay, where can I take the fruits of my labor, the time for money that I've traded away, those hours I put in every week at work to get a paycheck, where can I put that? Where can I diversify it in a place where maybe in the future, if I put this into real estate, or if I put it into a business venture, or if I put this into a portfolio of stocks, can I diversify in a way that someday in the future, it doesn't matter if my labor is worthwhile because I'll have capital, I'll have real estate producing cash flow, I'll have dividend paying stocks producing income. How can we get ourselves into a place where we are diversifying our income so that if we become obsolete, the income continues? That's what wealth is. It's how long could you survive if you stop going into work tomorrow? If the answer is a month, you are 1 month wealthy. If the answer is infinite because you have assets producing your income, the answer is infinite. You are infinitely wealthy. So anyways, guys, I was just kind of a little beefed. I was a little chapped about this whole idea that we are not going to do better than your parents. And the reality is, if you sit around and expect things to come to you, of course not. How would you do better than your parents who went out, got a degree, sacrificed those 40, 50 hours a week for 40 years to get a pension and to have a career? They made sacrifices for that. That was the best thing for them at the time. But we need to be a little more thoughtful and not assume that things are gonna come to us. We have to be a little more thoughtful about this equation of wealth, the algebra of wealth. So anyways, guys, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. If you got any value whatsoever, make sure to hit that like button, hit subscribe, and turn on post notifications for more videos just like this one every single week. Until next time.